Hi, I'm Alex Lamb, Chief Exec of Lantern Rouge and your host today on The Real Work. I'm an organisational psychologist and professional coach, and I'm personally interested in how careers work. Our mission here is to open access to career success and workplace belonging for everyone through these community conversations. We want to learn and share how careers are actually ticking. The Real Work explores how we show up for each other in all manner of professions, unpacking the experiences that shape us and how we can each play a role in designing our future of work. So my guest today is Sanya Goff. Sanya is an attorney and partner at Harp Muirhead Fata, based in Jamaica. Sanya was called to the Jamaican bar in 2003, and she now practices corporate, commercial and intellectual property law with a special interest in the area of pensions. She advises companies and trustees on personal risk, plan restructuring and governance, and she serves as a director and president of several financial groups and pension industry associations in Jamaica. She's an active member of the Jamaican Bar Association, and she speaks internationally on pension reform. She also happens to be Jamaica's 12th Eisenhower Fellow, having been selected for the Eisenhower Fellowship's 2020 Women's Leadership Program. So welcome, Sanya. So glad to have you.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Really good to have you. So our last guest was someone called Atlanta St. John, and she is in the management team of the Harlequin women's rugby team in the UK. She was an awesome person to interview about female sports and the progress they're making with their athletes. And she had a suggestion to you. Her call out was, be better than what she was at rapid response. That's her words, not mine. And speak with passion and really showcase your profession here. She found it a great opportunity to represent. So that's her gift on to you to get us started.
All right.
Yeah. So tell us, we've heard a bit in the intro there about some of the professional passions that you have, the work and the important, particularly in this space of pensions. So you've recently been selected for the Eisenhower Fellowship program. Did that relate to your work in pension reform, or is that a separate program?
Definitely connected. So I've been practicing as an attorney for about 17 years, and a big part of my practice, as you mentioned, is in the area of pensions. And that started out really just advising clients on their pension plans. And it has morphed into really looking at, or added to that, I'm now looking at kind of macro development and policy reform, pension restructuring in my country. And what the Eisenhower Fellowship really focuses on are women who are mid-career, really leaders in their respective fields, who have a passion for improving the lives of their citizens in their home countries. And so pension reform was a natural platform for me to, represent and demonstrate as being my objective under the fellowship. Because how the fellowship works is that everybody has like a platform or a project, and it's supposed to be something that really advances, peace, prosperity, justice in your country. And so for me, pensions was just a natural linkage for me, because it's just so much a part of my legal practice, but also where I see myself really making a contribution for national development. At one point in my career, I was, I'm a corporate commercial attorney. I'm, opening and closing transactions, you're making money. And I was like, this can't just be it. Because growing up in high school and in university, I was so involved in volunteer work and giving, community development and as contributions. I was a part of a lot of volunteer organizations, and not because I needed to fulfill some kind of school requirement. I truly enjoyed it.
Had that interest.
And then I found myself just kind of in practice and just working and just not feeling like I was really communicating, or really in touch with community development. And I really am happy that over time, my passion for pensions has really allowed me to see how I can make a contribution to nation building. So the Eisenhower Fellowship is going to be really good in supporting that.
Fantastic. And so you obviously had this, by the sound of it, a personal interest in having an impact, and also a professional skill set in terms of the work that you were doing in pension. Where do you see the impact in terms of the end outcomes and the results for the people in Jamaica, if you're able to achieve some of the recommendations that you have for the reform?
So I think the two biggest areas that I would count as success would be, one, an increase in financial literacy for Jamaica, an understanding of the importance of saving for retirement, financial empowerment, financial independence. And you can't get there unless you actually have literacy, you actually understand. So the public education programs and policies and initiatives are important. Now, the Pension Industry Association, where I'm the president, That's a big part of our mandate, but it's hard as one single lobby organization. As much as Jamaica is small, you really do need support from your regulators and from the government. And then the second side of it is actual pension coverage, pension participation, because you can know that it's important, but not do anything with that information. That knowledge doesn't take you anywhere. And so moving us from a place of really 10%, 10 to 15%, if you include the public sector workers, in terms of their participation in a pension arrangement, to doubling that and tripling that over the next 10 to 15 years. Now that's a really big ask. And that's not going to be done by a private sector driven lobby group. It's just not going to happen. So it's going to require a partnership with the government. And we're already seeing some work in that area and some interest in that area. We recently had some, national elections, and we didn't have a change of government. And so what's good about that is that some of the work that had started in pension reform will continue, because whenever you have a change in government, you have a disruption in policy, right? And so what I see as success, what I would count as success in 15 years would be increased financial literacy and doubling or tripling of pension participation.
Okay. And are there any cultural elements that you see that are unique to Jamaica? Because I know you would have been looking at pension funds and the compare and contrast to other countries as well. So what's the uniqueness that you see?
Excellent question, because when you're talking about changing mindsets and shifting behavior, you can't do that in a vacuum. So what we have in Jamaica is a large percentage of our population, they're low-income workers or informal workers. So immediately you have a challenge where culturally the thinking is, I just need to get through tomorrow. I mean, literally that's your reality. And so asking somebody who's in that situation to think about saving for when they're 65 is ridiculous, For many individuals, they live in crime infested environments where, the thought of living to 65 is actually unusual because of, And then of course you have issues of healthcare, etc. So it's hard to kind of to make that case in a reasonable way for people to save in the traditional ways, which is why we would have to find programs and initiatives that take pensions from a different angle. So what has worked in a lot of countries with a similar demographic to Jamaica, meaning low income informal workers, is what you call a micro pensions program. So micro pensions has been significantly successful in like India and Rwanda. And interestingly, I have fellows on my program from those countries who have actually heard of it. I mean, those are not their specific initiatives, but it'll be good to kind of bounce some ideas with them. So I'm looking forward to that. But essentially what it contemplates is small bite-sized savings over often over a long period of time. So we're not asking you to take 20% of your income every month, because that's just not your reality. But we're talking about asking the fish vendors, the market vendors, the coconut man, the taxi drivers, to just make small contributions a few times a week or a few times a month over a sustained period of time to contribute to a pension arrangement. But just to be clear, we do have a national insurance scheme, which is supposed to be like our national pension program. It's a social security scheme, so it's more than just pensions. But a lot of the informal and low-wage workers don't participate. So another way we could look at it is enhancing the NIS system, the National Insurance Scheme system, to find a way to adapt and kind of onboard low-income and informal workers in a way that's palatable for them, that's not overwhelming. And by doing that, they can participate in a scheme that's government run and that has more than pensions as part of its suite of benefits, because it has disability benefits, it has ill health, it has funeral grants. And those are things maybe even more meaningfully than a pension would be immediately more relevant to them,
So you can bundle it in with things they value.
Exactly. So for me, my hope is that even through the fellowship to understand not so much, micro pensions, because that's not really an initiative that you find in the US, but what are the best practices around communication? What are the best practices around empowering financial literacy and financial independence? And also, what are the best practices around just participation generally? Forget what you're participating in. There's some behavioral economics and behavioral, human behaviors that I think if we understand a little better, we might be able to tap into and encourage better participation.
It's good to hear you mention, I mean, you're speaking my language with the behavioral economics part. And I know there's obviously so many angles you can come at it from, of the policy, the government, the actual financial instruments. But as you're explaining it, it's how do you support an individual to opt in? What makes this compelling? And so there's this behavioral economics angle of a nudge. And that's what we find from a psychology perspective, is so often when people have scarcity, even if they have the knowledge, so maybe in this case, the financial literacy, they might not use it because the scarcity just creates such a near-term view of, yes, I need to invest in pension, but I also need, you know, gas for my car today. So I don't have that range of thinking. So yeah, how do you make it about really near-term benefits to people? Because pension makes it sound like, as you say, it may be something I will or won't use. So have you seen anything, any insights that you've found from that nudge or the behavioral economics perspective that you're exploring?
So we haven't really seen any rollout really of those initiatives. We've had a few speakers kind of, you know, pass through the country and talk about it and things. So that's part of why I think the Eisenhower Fellowship will allow me to learn a little bit more about that and bring some of those perspectives to Jamaica, you know, not as to purport to be a kind of psychologist or an economist of anything, but just to say, listen, this is really what best practices show. These are the learning, and there's how can we build on this? And so, you know, it's important as well culturally that you don't, you know, return from fellowship or from studying abroad with a know-it-all attitude, right? So it has to always be a kind of collaborative posture, a kind of gently bringing in the perspective without suggesting to the regulator that you don't know what you're doing and you haven't known for the last 15 years, but I now know because I went on a fellowship, right? Yeah. So, but it's about seeing how we can kind of introduce that and weave it into the fabric of our considerations around developing macroeconomic policies for specifically in relation to pension security.
Yeah, and as you said, bring it back in a way that can be acceptable to people, as opposed to off-putting because it's an outside-in maybe perspective, as opposed to, it sounds like everything you're doing is homegrown and with listening and experience of on the ground. But so that's a really nice segue into the Eisenhower program for you. Obviously, this is an opportunity to create and experience a global network of peers who are all having impact in different, very cross-functional areas, cross intersections of whatever their passions are. So as you're going into this, I understand that there's a programmatic element to it. So what are you hoping to take away and learn from that?
So I must tell you, Alex, I am very excited about the fellowship, like very excited. So it officially starts next month, but they've already had these kind of lead-up programs where we've been meeting the other fellows. So because of COVID, this year we're going to do the first part of it fully remote and fully online. And then next year, if travel actually resumes and it's safe, we would have a bunch of in-person activities and programs, right? But even online, there's a lot of energy. And like you said, you know, I'm so fascinated by meeting these women who are making contributions in their respective spaces in areas that are so diverse. And it's surprising. Maybe there are about 4 or 5 of the 25, maybe about 4 or 5 women who have some form of program or project relating to mental health and well-being. Some just focus on women, some are just kind of workplace well-being, but a kind of well-being mental health type of thrust. And then everybody else is kind of quite different. I mean, I'm the only person talking about retirement security and pension reform, which, by the way, I'm so excited about, and people must be like, this is so boring.
We've heard it,
But I love it because there's so many people who have said to me, what, like pensions, like, why on earth do you find interesting? I don't know, I really do. And I find that I take every single element of development in my country, I take it so seriously. Like any guideline, the FSC issues, I'm just all over it, like a mad woman. But anyway, so the hope is, yes, it's a networking fellowship, right? So by and large, it's about meeting people, and their network is extensive. Not just former fellows. When I say you're always a fellow, but persons who, you know, from former years. And they have all gone on to make like significant impacts in their different, you know, spaces. And so it's about those networks opening like other networks. And so my hope is really to meet people who really are behind the pension space. One, in terms of, like I said, literacy, participation, and just understand basic good governance. Because at the end of the day, you know, sometimes we get caught up in the sexy and the, you know, the fancy and the new talk. But the truth is just basic governance, transparency, properly run plans that's important to understand as well. And also not being distracted and feeling like everything's perfect in the US, because it's not, because there are pension schemes that haven't been run well. There are persons who don't have any pension coverage, who participating in schemes that went insolvent, etc. So understanding the lessons out of those failures as well, that's part of what I'd like to explore. Quite a few universities in the US as well, they have been doing a lot of studies in developing countries. And so there are lots of, learning from those studies and the results and the findings from those reports. So it's really multifaceted in terms of where it can take you. Just in the few conversations I've had, I've realized that even though I'm kind of looking at micro pensions and looking at participation, at the end of the day, my project could probably take on so many different it can morph into something else. Because just by talking to other people, you're realizing, I really thought the solution was over here, but in fact, it might actually be over there,
Yeah.
And what I've realized is that even talking with a few of the other women, a lot of them have as an underpinning theme education. That whole talk about literacy. So whether it be about mental health, whether it be about physical health, whether it be about financial literacy, which is financial health, it's all kind of quite a few of them. And I think learning from each other in that respect is important. In Jamaica, we have like culturally networking as you see it in the US, like in social media and on television. It's not quite the same in Jamaica.
No, what is it like?
So it's not as bold. It's not as kind of forthright. I've often said that when I meet persons who have studied in like the US, especially tertiary studies, they have like perfected what I call the elevator pitch. You meet them at a cocktail function, and within like the first minute, you have their entire CV in that 1 minute. It's as if they were trained to meet you, and in like the space of 60 seconds, they've told you where they went to school, what they studied, and maybe 2 or 3 accomplishments, and you're like, wow.
Let me respond with the same template. Yeah.
Exactly. But we're not quite that bold. As much as Jamaicans tend to be very strong in personality, we tend to have a kind of, we're reserved where that is concerned. We don't kind of step out in that way. And so the concept of how to best network and get the most out of the fellowship, I really have to focus on that, because it doesn't come naturally, but the program officer, everyone gets assigned a program officer who kind of works with you to set up appointments and meetings and stuff. She's been really good, and I think she'll help me to kind of bring me out, and she's very good at saying, okay, not every meeting needs to be a pensions meeting. Let's talk about meeting some other people where the common interest is something different. Maybe you're just both Jamaican, or maybe you both have an interest in some kind of, you like to kickbox. So let's find somebody, it's just something else.
Yeah.
That can help to kind of break it up a little bit.
Or maybe you're even completely different and you just get energy from each other, and as you said, that's completely out of my box for the thinking. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm looking forward to that, but I'm also going to have to spend a little time in terms of just kind of pushing myself out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Being okay asking questions, not just kind of ending every interview or every meeting just as it is, where it is, but where can we take this? What's the next step? What more can I get from this interaction? So that's my hope. There are a lot of people who talked about the fellowship. These are former fellows, opening doors professionally for them. I haven't really focused on that. I mean, my hope is that at some point I will transition out of private practice into something that's more policy driven, and maybe even moving into helping to develop better pension arrangements in other Caribbean countries and Latin American countries, just in terms of my Caribbean space. And then of course that would require relationships and partnerships with NGOs and kind of multilaterals. But that's, a good 10 years from now, but I'm definitely open to that, because I really don't want to be in private practice until like I'm 70. I'm just not interested in that,
Yeah.
So my hope is that, relationships like this can help to kind of broaden my perspective on opportunities available.
Yeah. So it's a real exploration. And when you're talking about your potential career looking forward, which I think is always a great, great horizons to consider, especially in this program. If you look at backwards through, I guess, your study and your volunteering experience and then early careers in private practice, what would you say are some of the key moments or pivotal points where you had either a decision or a key experience that have kind of brought you to this point?
I think some major turning points in my career would be one when I was invited to sit on the board of National Commercial Bank.
Mm-hmm.
So National Commercial Bank then became NCD Financial Group. So I'm sitting on the board of two publicly listed companies. I would have been the youngest female at the time, and that was huge.
So, yeah, very impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think I mean, at first when I got the call, I was like, me. I was just so, I didn't even think I was on anybody's radar in that way.
How did they identify you?
Well, that's the thing. I'm not sure, what the internal conversations were. I know they were looking for a female director, and I know they were looking for a younger director. But how my name got on a short list, I mean, I would have done legal work and interacted professionally with many of the directors on the board already. So they would have known me, but in terms of, kind of getting on the list, I don't know. What I will say though is that was major. That was a huge turning point in my career, in that it certainly catapulted me into the rooms, into the boardrooms, into the conversations, and I was at the table, so to speak. It is, and even now sometimes can be very overwhelming, because of course I'm in the room with persons who could be, my parents, with networks 10 times as deep, with experience, 10 times as broad. And this is a financial institution, it's a bank, it's a publicly listed company, and I practice law. I'm not, and they weren't bringing me to be their legal advisor. They had a suite of legal advisors already. And so kind of finding my place on the board, where do I fit? What really will my contributions be? For some people, their contributions are very focused on particular themes and, aspects. And some people it's very broad. And I just really, I struggled very much in the early stages to kind of find my place. And even now I find that there are times when I second guess contributions. I'm kind of like, I'm not sure, should I say this? And that tends to be a challenge. But I definitely feel that I've gotten bolder over time and more confident over time. So that was big. And I think that, like I said, got me, in the room at the table. And then I was later, maybe about 3 or 4 years later, I was invited to sit on the board of another listed company. And so I think those two invitations were significant. And just so you know, culturally in Jamaica, board appointments are deemed to be a meaningful contribution to your resume, your CV.
Absolutely.
For you professionally. There are some jurisdictions, I mean, even in the Caribbean, where board appointments aren't seen that way. But in Jamaica, no, it's considered to be quite a significant honor.
It's a big deal. It is here too. That's, in my mind, that's the way I take it. And so I know in Australia, you take various courses. Probably a lot of them have to do with a legal reference point and some of the governance, responsibilities, etc. Did you have to go through anything like that in Jamaica to be, I guess, qualified or have a license, so to speak, to be a board member?
No. You have to make it done proper. So to be a board member of a publicly listed company that's a financial institution, you have to be determined to be fit and proper by the central bank. So I had to be vetted in terms of financial background and never been convicted of an offense, that kind of thing. But I didn't have to be trained to be on the board. But that being said, the board, the company does have training requirements for their directors, but it's not a central bank or legislatively required training.
Requirements, yeah.
You're expected to kind of keep up on trends and not only read independently, but they do have their own training programs. And all financial do that, yeah.
And so when you look at, you were saying, okay, it took me some time to work out my contribution and to make sure that you felt like you were adding your uniqueness, your point of view. Obviously, they brought you in for a reason, because you brought that diversity of thought and the perspective that they were trying to achieve. So what do you think it was that helped you build that confidence? And then what is the contribution? How would you describe your unique additive effect there?
Right. So I think in terms of, a lot of it was the passage of time, that's for sure. Just kind of getting more comfortable, reading the room properly. Sometimes you can take the wrong cues, in terms of just people's responses, where the board tends to focus its attention. So, ensuring that you don't major in the minor, just simply to be able to say something. And so over time, and let me tell you, I'm a woman of God. I'm a very much of, Christianity is a big part of my life. And And so a lot of it has been prayer in terms of preparation for meetings, prayer before meetings, asking the Lord to really give me that right voice, to be bold, but not to be brash, to be, to be confident, but not to be obnoxious. So to kind of give me the words. And that has actually been a big part of my professional journey. And I feel
that's a good insight.
I credit like that spiritual kind of direction as a big part of where I am right now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think even whether it's a prayer or it's a moment of collecting your thoughts and setting your intention, and I guess in a sense asking for inspiration as well. I think that's a really nice experience to have, whether it's prayer or mindfulness or reflection, to come in and to come out of a key performance moment. Yeah.
So that's been, and in terms of like where I feel my impact the most, I can't help it. Law is a big part of it, law and governance, because that's just kind of what I do. So I can't leave that at the door. And then also, I'm very, what's the word? I'm kind of very diligent in terms of my review of things. So, and that's what I think helps me even in private practice as well. So I'm very detail oriented. I'm very task driven. So even reading board papers, I don't gloss over things. Like I pick up inconsistencies, I'll notice discrepancies, and so I'm able to kind of bring that kind of tightness, I think, to board review, board documents, board conversations, where I'm like, okay, but that's not what we said last week. When things kind of, we move along so quickly, we're not quite keeping a tight tab on things. So I think, and I guess I would pin that on the governance as well, because that is a big part of governance, broadly speaking. So if I had to kind of put it in like two quick words, I would say legal and governance would be two areas that I think have major in terms of
the contribution. That's it. And now that you're on two boards, do you see yourself playing a different role or having a different contribution based on the dynamic between the two, or the difference between them? Yeah.
So NCB is a financial institution. So already they have a lot more layers in terms of regulatory obligations and compliance. Whereas Jamaica Producers is more into logistics and food and beverage. So it's a relatable brand in a different way to, just in terms of growing up as a child, just in terms of as a consumer of financial products versus a consumer of actual, food and drink. And so and the board culture itself as well is very different. So at the financial institution board, of course, it's a lot more kind of meticulous, very, very surgical and specific in terms of in terms of how we document minutes and what we're saying and be very precise. Jamaica Producers is a little bit more relaxed. The culture is a little bit more friendly. Many of the directors have been on the board for like years, decades. Family friends in many respects, that they know each other. There's a relationship outside of the boardroom, and you see that it's quite effusive in the boardroom as well. And so conversations, even how we move through board papers, is quite different. But yeah, definitely, and that took some adjusting too, because of course I would have gone into the Jamaica Producers boardroom a few years after being kind of inducted into NCB, and I initially kind of had an NCB mindset, but I have to shift it, when the time comes to being Jamaica Producer.
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting. And coming back to your career moments, I can imagine that becoming partner was, it's a key milestone in my mind. Being outside the legal profession, it's such an achievement. I'm sure it is. So anything you can explain there with regards to the trajectory, the work, the experience of having that moment in your career?
Right. So my path was a little different. I was an associate at a law firm, Myers Fletcher & Gordon, one of the largest law firms here. So I went straight from law school to Myers Fletcher. And at the time, certainly, Myers Fletcher was like was the best law firm in the island. It was one of the largest, most successful. I was there for 7 years. During the time, I got married to my now husband. So we would have been together from law school. We both got offers to join Myers Fletcher & Gordon at the same time. And let me just backtrack a little bit. Gavin and I have been friends since we were 11. We were in the same class in high school. And we went all the way through high school together, just friends, during what we call sixth form, which is the last 2 years of high school. He went away to boarding school, and that's when he would have met Mike. And then I would have continued in Jamaica, and then we both ended up in law school together, which is a 5-year program, basically. Friends through the entire time. So it was the last final year of law school, things kind of started. And so when we both got offers at the same law firm, it was still very early in the relationship. You wouldn't make a decision to not take up the offer because of this very new relationship that may or may not work. So we both ended up working together, which I can just tell you is not healthy for it's
a budding romance. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't think about it. If you have a choice, just avoid it. But anyway, so we started working at this law firm together. And it was fine. I mean, the relationship was open, people knew about it. But once we got engaged, I mean, it was at a point when we were both eligible for partnership, in the next kind of year or two. And then we got married. And they have a policy that does not support married partners in the partnership. And so it was a big question around who would leave, who would stay. And let's just say that it was a very, very challenging time for our marriage because it was a very challenging time. Both of us felt we deserved it. Both of us deserved it, in fact. And the partnership, as in the partners, the existing partnership had said they would decide who they would take. We wouldn't be the ones to choose who, So that was a little tricky. And so I think kind of word got out that somebody needed to leave. It was quite a talked about situation because a lot of lawyers knew there was this issue at Miles Fletcher, what was going to happen. And then I was headhunted. I got an offer from a headhunter at PwC actually, and there was a law firm, a Caribbean law firm, who they were looking for a partner. They were looking for two partners actually. So I interviewed and actually flew to Barbados and interviewed for it. And then I got the offer to take up partnership in Jamaica. So it's a Caribbean law firm, but it has a footprint in Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad. And so that was great. And I would have been transitioning in as partner. So that was great. So I went from associate to partner in this Caribbean law firm. And that's where I got exposure to a lot of the corporate commercial law, the banking, the finance, the insolvency kind of work. So that was great because I wasn't doing much of that at Miles Fletcher. So I went on, took a partnership there. Gavin eventually got elevated to partnership at Miles. But the environment at that firm was quite toxic. It was very unhealthy. And it was during that time I decided to leave. I got offered the NTE directorship, and I actually left without any job to take up. I just left. So once my notice period expired, I just left. And then I was approached and offered partnership at my current firm. And it was, like I said, before my notice period even ended, I had a partnership offer. And that's, God opening doors that no man can close, because there you are, you've resigned, you've decided that you've had enough of this. You don't have a substitute job or a new job to replace it with, but I had faith that this was not, it was going to happen. And I got this offer. HMF, as we, refer to Hartmere Head Fata, is an excellent firm. It's about a medium-sized firm, a lot of good corporate commercial work. And I really have seen my practice really blossom during this time, and so I'm happy where I am. It's a comfortable work environment. I have good partners, good work, a lot of good experience, and it's, like I said, a strong corporate commercial firm. So it was a different in terms of my journey. For lots of people, you're associates and you're working, and then you're kind of selected for partnership. And no, I kind of became a partner. I was headhunted to be a partner in another firm. So when I was approached by my current firm, the only conversation was about partnership. So that's kind of how my trajectory went.
So interesting. And it's always good to hear the kind of non-traditional stories because there's choices and there's decisions that you've made along the way. And I mean, if I reflect back to you, some of that is around, the size of the market that you're in, with regards to, okay, there's one top firm and you're both in the same industry. Some of it's about family and family decisions that we're making. And then I also heard themes of just taking a chance, like saying, okay, this isn't the right thing for me. Let me make decisions based on my gut and my ethics, as opposed to, I guess the traditional job trajectory. So interesting. Yeah. And so from a family perspective, I think it's not uncommon to hear these stories right now because, with COVID and so many people's workplaces now being into their home places, family and work have sort of collided. It sounded like that happened for you earlier than COVID because of the industry and the story that you've shared with regards to Gavin and the first firm. But like, Is there anything else that you see now of, like, you and Gavin are both still in the legal profession? You know, I imagine you've got really demanding jobs with, you know, client-facing responsibilities. How do you balance having, you know, family and these career passions that are obviously taking you places?
It's challenging. It's very challenging. And you know, the truth is that you have to kind of face each day determining what are going to be priorities for today. So I've had to really rethink what balance and prioritizing looks like. And you know, you get guilted into feeling like if you're not always putting your son first, well, in my case, my son, putting your child first, or you're not always putting your family first, you're somehow like a bad person, or you're not, you're doing it wrong. And I've reached a point where I recognize that no, there are days when my clients come first. They do. And that doesn't mean I love my child any less. It just means that right now, with all my responsibilities, that's what I need to make a priority. No, at the end of the day, what's most important to me doesn't change. It will always be my family. It will always be my son, my husband. You know, I have a great village, Alex. I mean, my family is a tight, close-knit family. It's a healthy relationship. Everybody's healthy physically, you know, everybody's doing well. And so we, you know, it's a healthy environment, and my village is really strong. And over the years, my friends who are a part of my village, that number has dwindled to a solid like 4 or 5, and that they're like family as well. And so there are times when there's no question that they're the most important part of my life, but there are times when they can't be given the priority of my time right now because of what's competing. So I have, you know, commercial transactions that have to close. I just have to be, you know, present for that. I'm president of the Pension Industry Association. Sometimes the lobby effort, or you know, a particular moment in time in the industry is so important, it has to take all my time. You know, it's not billable time, it's not time for family, but it's so important in terms of regulatory development. I need to be pouring through this right now. But I try not to lose sight and to kind of not tap out too often, because I need to be really aware, okay, when did I really spend quality time with Julian, you know? Maybe that today I'm gonna have to leave a little early or shut off a little early. And I mean, I employ everything from alarms. I mean, I'll set off alarms, label the alarms, you know, stop work now, go to Julian. Like literally, I label the alarm, bedtime, story time, because you will have the time run off. And before you know it, he's fallen asleep and you didn't really actually get up from your desk. And so I try to be very mindful with that. I also am very big on, like, you know, in terms of spending time with him, you know, like art and craft stuff. So I just try and do something, because I realize that for kids, they don't need a lot. They just kind of need you present, right? So they need to know that you're kind of spend the time. And then there are times I'm properly guilty, especially around like spending time with like watching TV and on the tablet, and I'm just wanting to be happy, so I'll just kind of give in because I know I've not really spent, you know. But I moved away from this concept of work-life balance to work-life integration. I'm recognizing that there's sometimes when I'm putting him to sleep, he's already half asleep, he's on his way out, and I'm sending an email, I'm doing work because it's actually convenient and I'm able to do it right now, you know. I'm taking him to the doctor and we're not quite ready to go in, and he's occupied and I'm dealing with something. So the concept of balance is more, I kind of moved away from that to a conversation in my head around, you know, just work-life integration and kind of better weaving all the elements together, but recognizing that nothing is wrong with prioritizing elements in your life, you know, at specific points in time that don't involve your family. And you're not a bad person because of that. In fact, probably highly, you know, more effective if you're able to kind of successfully do it. But checking in is important, because you sometimes think you're doing a great job and your spouse doesn't feel that way. You know, he doesn't feel like you're really kind of paying attention, or so it's important to kind of have those open lines of communication. Kind of where sometimes you need to draw the line.
And taking the feedback cycle. I'm in the same boat as you. I think everything is meshed together in terms of there's no strict delineations of I'm at work and then I'm at home. It's, you know, I can be thinking about work while I'm in the shower, so therefore I'm kind of at work. So but it does start to come together, and I find that I can be more efficient because I'm still present in the moment with what I'm doing, but I am snatching little bits of time to be useful in those moments as opposed to blocks. And so the one thing that I balance through is thinking, am I prioritizing other aspects of myself? Because I'm always snatching bits on the go and doing things for child, work, family, community, whatever it happens to be. Do I snatch moments? And so for me, I try to block in, have I been for a run? Have I read a book this month? Have I, what does that look like for you in terms of personal time?
Oh, that's a great question, Alex. And the funny thing is that I love to spend time by myself. I really do. As much as I'm an outgoing person and I love my family and I have great friends, I love me some alone time. And so like the major things I love to do, I love to read. And funnily enough, as much as COVID has brought on a lot of pressure and work hasn't really stopped, I found more time to read. It's the strangest thing. So I've been reading a lot, and I love to read. That's been a passion for me as a child.
What are you reading
I do a
now?
lot of kickboxing. So right now I'm reading this book called The Decon King. Yeah. So it's by, girl, you put me on the spot.
That's okay. I never memorized the names.
Yeah, I rarely do. But anyway, it's on the I think it's on the Booker Washington shortlist. I'm not sure, but anyway,
okay.
it's really good. I lost my train of thought. So, okay, I love to read kickboxing. So I do kickboxing in the morning. That's kind of my thing. I used to run a lot, but I find that I kind of transitioned out of my passion for running. So I do kickboxing in the mornings and love going to the beach. I love to travel, but as you know, that can't happen right now. So we do a little bit kind of island traveling and kind of island touring now that it's COVID. But yeah, my alone time. And then sometimes, honestly, just meditation, just kind of journaling. And I find that, to be honest, I need to do that a little bit more in terms of bringing that more into like a regular thing, because it really is therapeutic. It's so funny. Years ago when Gavin suggested journaling to me, I was like, don't be ridiculous. I'm not doing that, right? I'm not journaling. I'm not writing anything down. I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. But I started it and I love it. It really does help to kind of distill your thoughts. Yeah, it does. And I wait too long sometimes. I think I wait till I'm feeling a lot of pressure, and then I'm like, you know what, I need to spend a little time kind of jotting this down. And I think if I was more mindful and diligent in terms of journaling with more discipline, I would be able to not kind of allow it to kind of pile up on me some of the stress.
Yeah.
Just this weekend, I was really feeling kind of overwhelmed, but did some journaling and it made such a difference. Yeah.
It's good to hear. I think you like, it's always nice when it's an organic thing that people go towards, as opposed to having been, you know, prescribed, even though it sounds like Gavin suggested it. But, you know, when you see the value of it and you really experience the benefits, because like from a neuroscience perspective, they can prove it as well, just how much reflective activity you have and how many more insights and the like the gratitude that tends to come out as well, of just like, poof, okay, that's out of my mind and onto a page somewhere. But there's also something quite beautiful, I think, about handwriting, because we don't handwrite as much these days as we used to. And you handwrite at the pace much slower, obviously, than what you can think. So it forces a reflective practice as you're getting it out. Whereas because we can touch type, of course, typing isn't as fast as thinking, but you're so much faster that it's much less, you're not going through a process as much. So yeah, it's really lovely to hear.
That, because I didn't even really connect it to like any kind of like neuroscience element, but it makes sense.
Yeah, any reflective practice. I think the things that you've shared around prayer, meditation, exercise, so of course the psychosomatic response of just like expressing things as opposed to having to say them all. Especially like I love the idea of kickboxing. I don't know, that to me brings a lot of associations of being able to let out power and feel strength, and maybe even sometimes have some anger come through as well. So that psychosomatic response, I think, is super valuable. And then the journaling is where you kind of making sense of it. So in my mind, you've got like a really nice circle, a really nice circuit of self-growth. And then you add this network and you add these things that you're really passionate about. It becomes a very rich bed for creating like something pretty amazing to come.
I appreciate that validation. Thank you.
Yes, of course. No, exactly. Not that you needed it from me, but it's just always because this is what I do for business is a lot of coaching and a lot of working with people, and how do I embed these habits and these attitudes and these things in my life and my relationships that are actually going to help me flourish. And we spend so much time kind of repairing and supporting, and then when you hear people who have all of the kind of cornerstones in place, like, oh, great. Some people are actually, you know, practicing the
Right.
the best ways of doing it. So really cool. So I know you shared with me beforehand the link to your, tell me again, I think it was your Pension Industry Association of Jamaica website. So, and you've already shared so much about the passion and I guess the work that you're doing in this space. Can you tell us a little bit about specifically the association and what would you like us to know? What's compelling about that association at the moment?
So PIAJ, Pension Industry Association, is a lobby group that really looks towards two pillars. We really focus on financial literacy, people understanding the importance of pension reform, pension participation, and also pension coverage would be the second pillar. So it's similar to kind of the areas in which my country needs to reform, you know, improving literacy as well as improving participation. So we drive that. Our main focus is private sector pensions because our public sector pension arrangement is really handled in the public sector by the government. But this is talking about private sector pension reform because our pensions regime was really non-existent, you know, for the last, like, before the last 14 years. So when the law came into force, it was really new for us. You know, for the first time, we had a regulatory environment that was, you know, licensing trustees and regulating pension plans and requiring trust documents to have certain things in them, you know, regulating, you know, how you distributed the money out of the plan. Nobody had to be answerable really to any, you know, regulatory body before that time. And so bringing this act into force was huge for Jamaica. It was a major shift in the legal landscape when it came to pensions. And it was so funny that at the time I was at Miles Fletcher and they had decided because of the law was coming in, they were going to form a pension practice group. And I volunteered to be a part of the practice group. And that's kind of how it started. And so in terms of my practice, And then one of the partners at Miles formed the association at the time. And I was a part of the association. So I just came up initially just kind of working, helping. And then I became a director, became chair of the legislative committee. And just that's how the work has been. And so we have evolved over the years and really have strengthened. And now we really focus, like I said, on two main things. You know, we talk about public education and we talk about pension participation and coverage. So those are the main things. We have a very vibrant board of directors. Many of the directors are captains of industry in their respective fields. And so that's been really good. And we have moved from a place where nobody really paid us any mind to being a lobby group that no decision is made in respect to private sector pensions until the PIAJ is consulted. And through our lobby work, we have been able to unlock, you know, greater investment opportunities for pension funds because the regulatory environment is still very restrictive in terms of how pension funds can be invested. And we have lobbied for change and liberalization in many of those areas. And what you're seeing now is that it allows investment managers to deploy funds in different areas that can yield greater returns for the funds and therefore better benefits for participants.
Amazing, thank you. I've got we'll definitely share that URL in the show notes. And yeah, it's just great to understand you'd shared so much about that with regards to your passion at the beginning and the different areas that you're involved in. It's just good to understand the association and the I guess how you're formalizing that as a lobby group. I always think it's such a unique kind of public force, public you know, I guess power. There's so much, you know, momentum, I guess, that comes behind these kind of lobby groups. So another, as you say, just hearing you there, it sort of happened by you putting your hand up and just taking a chance and going towards something that you're interested in. And it sounds like it's really rolled into something that has huge national interest for the growth of Jamaica as a whole. Yeah, amazing. Not many people can put you know, say those things about their career in terms of the impact. So it's incredible. Okay, so we're going to wrap up with a couple of rapid fire questions. So I'll ask the beginning. Yeah, exactly. Again, Atlanta's suggestion is, you know, be ready. So the first question, a skill I'm working on right now is?
Learning to speak less.
Speak less. Okay. In which situation does that skill apply for a lawyer?
Well, I found that, you don't mind talking like after each question? Like,
no,
okay. Yeah, I feel like, Alex, if I had to go back and do it all over, I would speak less. I think I've learned probably, unfortunately, I think later in life than I would have liked, the value of listening and the value of pausing. I tend to kind of just first thing out my mouth, I'm going to say it. My immediate reaction emotionally to someone, a circumstance, an email, or anything. I'm just kind of like and learning the power of pausing and learning the power of kind of just reserving speech. And I think if I could do it all over, I would have kind of employed those skills a little bit earlier. So I'm working on that. Speaking less, yeah.
So interesting. Okay, so I want my kid to know that
he is a leader.
Yeah.
I want him to know that he's a leader. I find that the concept of leadership has changed remarkably over the last 10 years. Because it used to be that, growing up as, we would have thought leaders had to be somebody who, had a particular title, played a particular role in a specific organization. But you're seeing now that leadership is not about that. I mean, when you look at the Black Lives Matter movement, when you look at change that's happening for all these different kind of interest groups and associations around the world, being a thought leader, being a change leader, doesn't look a particular way. You don't have to dress a particular way. You don't need a particular title, nor do you need a particular degree. And so I want Julian to grow up in a world and in a home where he's encouraged to lead.
Yeah.
And leadership involves immediately being a servant as well. So understanding that leadership really means that you're serving. And I hope to demonstrate that, because both Gavin and I, play leadership roles in our respective areas of interest, in our respective professions, in our respective practices. And understanding that, growing up and seeing parents in leadership positions, whether they're traditional or non-traditional, whatever it looks like for him from his perspective, that can be for him as well. And that's a meaningful way to contribute to his community.
Yeah, amazing. So many people misunderstand servant leadership, don't they? It can be quite a confronting language to hear, but actually when you can embrace it, it's so powerful for the other people around and leading yourself as well. If I take an intermission, we've got another two rapid fire questions, but I neglected to ask that what is the sensation of the Black Lives Matter movement on the grounds in the Caribbean at the moment? How is it touching, in the same sense that we're seeing it here in the US? Is there reverberation where you are?
Definitely, there's an embracing of it, and there's a lot of kind of like conversation around it. People follow it closely. I mean, for us in Jamaica, what happens in the US touches us so significantly.
So close, yeah.
Geographically, yeah. And in terms of our reliance as trade partners, etc., a lot of Jamaicans have migrated to the US. So the Jamaican diaspora is really heavy and concentrated in the US. And so what happens there really affects families here. And so there's definitely an embracing of it. There's a lot of conversation and dialogue around it. So yeah, it's meaningful. We have a lot of our own cultural issues and issues around crime and violence and, our economic issues and challenges. And so, oftentimes there's a conversation around, American politics and American social issues taking up so much of the narrative for us out here when we have our own to deal with. So you find that there's always a lot kind of happening in terms of on the ground in Jamaica. But yes, we watch it. We communicate about it. We talk about it. It's in editorials in the papers. Articles are written. It's a big conversation piece.
That's good to understand. Even though it takes different iterations in different cultures around the world, I think we just have such a moment to be, like you said, thinking about our local issues, but opening up more of that discussion for whichever catalyst, and making sure that it is unique to, the culture that you're in. But by the sound of it, at least there's discussion happening. So hopefully out of a lot of pain, there's some silver linings of a reimagining and a dialogue, as you mentioned. Good, I'm glad to understand. Thanks for sharing. I'm always so intrigued how things are working on the ground. So my next question, my biggest advantage is?
I know it's supposed to be rapid fire. My biggest advantage is that I am bold. I think so. I think my biggest advantage is that I'm bold. So as much as on the flip of it, I need to learn to manage how quickly I speak about things and how I react. there's a boldness that I have, and when I'm passionate about something, that comes out even more, and it may even come out aggressive, because I find that there are unfortunate, there's unfortunate nomenclature that's attached to when women are bold. So you know, you're seen to be passionate or emotional or worked up, versus a man who is forthright,
leading. Yeah, exactly.
Confident, leading. Yeah, you get those words when it's a man, and that's unfortunate. But and that's a challenge that I have, where I'm forceful on a particular point with the regulator, or we're arguing about a point and I feel really strongly about it, and it's like, oh my God, why is she getting so worked up? But if a man was doing the same thing, that's not the word those aren't the words you would use, right? But yeah. I still own it as a strength. And honestly, Alex, understanding timing and temperance is important in any environment. And so, I don't mean to be, and I don't ever want to be unapologetically bold, because there are times when that's just not the right implement for the environment. So I see it as a positive. I see it as a strength of mine, but I recognize as well that I continue to have to learn timing and temperance, notwithstanding. Yeah.
To land for the audience and to get the outcomes that you're aiming for. Yeah. So boldness, but with some kind of temperature control, knowing when to turn it off or turn it up. Yeah. But definitely you have it.
Just in terms of, great leaders and require the right people to be around them, and understanding what that looks like. Because for me, even as the president of the PIAJ, there are times when you have to get really combative to kind of push for the change you want. But knowing when maybe this particular conversation or this particular fight is not the one that you need to be the face of. So I find the right person in my organization who, as you said, is going to land it the right way, because I know that this conversation with this person needs a different angle. And I have to recognize whether I have the ability to really bring that across in the required time, or at the required moment. And that's important, recognizing where you're actually not strong at all, and what's required, what particular strength is required in a particular environment. Yeah. So I think leadership requires surrounding yourself with the right team as well.
Yeah, and deploying and utilizing and actually knowing their strengths. It's and I'd add, like, my own reflection on that is also knowing how not to take things personally, even if people are directing personal things at you, how to not direct it personally back at them. There's roles that we're playing of my role is to get this outcome, your role is to push back, and whoever is coming in and out of that role, it could be anyone, those two roles are going to be opposing. So recognizing yourself in a position to get an outcome, as opposed to me, Alex, being the bad person at heart. Really, it's a hard thing to dissect from. But so final question, my gift to the next guest is.
All right. So my gift to the next guest is to be relaxed, be prepared, and to be yourself. I mean, be honest with your experiences. It's very easy to kind of dress it up, but the environment is very welcoming to kind of just be real about what your life experience has been. So be relaxed, be yourself.
Fantastic. I like it. I will definitely pass that on. So thank you, Sanya. I really enjoyed it. It was just such a great conversation, and I got to meander through your world. So I really appreciate you being so generous.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you for inviting me. And it's really good to see you. And we hope we can actually be together again soon.
I know, absolutely. So close and yet so far. I feel that way.
All right.
Thank you. All right, so The Real Work was hosted today by me, Alex Lamb, and wouldn't be possible without the contributions of our whole team here at Lantern Rouge. Production support is managed by Mark Hayes, and our beautiful music is brought to you by our band. That is it for now. See you at work. Thank you.